what makes us human is the collection of ideas that we hold. And all those ideas that we hold is based on, it's like we're in a bubble of our own thoughts and emotions and ideas. And we really are like, it is like a bubble because of the radiation bands on Earth. We are living in a dense third density matrix.
Welcome to the Biba frequency, home to conversations with consciousness. I'm Biba, your host. Today's episode, we've got Daniel. Daniel's been on the show a few times, and I invited him on today to talk about the human story, really about what is a human made up of, or basically the human history. And he talks a lot about humans, ET races, the origins of our Earth and how it all kicked off and started, and the different cosmic wars and all of that. It's a beautiful episode. I've just spoke to Daniel, and so I'm making this after our conversation. However, I'm going to introduce you to him now, and I'd like you to open your mind and open your heart to this information, because it might really be able to help you on your own journey. Until next time. Hey, Daniel, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Biba, thanks for having me.
I'm so thrilled to have you on today, because today you're going to be very specific in talking about the origins of the human race and UFO disclosure and project Blue Beam. So before we get into anything, tell me a little bit about your own personal experience with the phenomena and what sparked your interest in your own research and discoveries in this field.
Well, what really sparked it was, it all began with about the moon landing questions and everything. That's really where I started off, whether to kind of undo the veil of what we have, of what turned out to be a lot of lies and deceit, and what we now know as our reality. Your reality starts changing an enormous amount, and what really started it was questioning, just questions, really, just starting questions. And the more you ask questions, the more information comes through. And if you're looking with an honest heart and you're trying to discern and take your own ego out of the equation, when you go searching, the answers just start revealing themselves to you. And my focus was initially on the moon landing and whether they're real, and then the physics of that. I got very into it, from the very specifically targeted about how could it be possible, and given the technology we had, given what they were supposed to have done at the time, using like Casio watch powered rocket ship, which is, it's not that high level of technology. So that's what sparked it, really. But what really changed, was a game changer, was actually seeing UFOs. And this is just something that it's so special. It felt like an honor, really, to see it, because I think I maybe saw 30 or 40 of them. Overall, maybe 50 in sightings in total. One only about a week ago, actually, as well. So still very recently, and I'm at the point where I can see them whenever I don't want to say I summon them. I just get their attention at the right moment, and sometimes it doesn't happen when I'm out. But again, seeing is believing in a lot of ways. But from the perspective of metaphysics and how consciousness works, believing is actually seeing. But in my case with the UFOs, I physically saw them as well. So it wasn't all just, there's a lot of theory involved. I know you hear so many stories of different people, but the most important thing to anchor all this for me was actual evidence. And the evidence was seeing them. And you might say, well, how do you know that they were UFOs, or what do you even mean by that? Well, what I know is that I know what satellites look like in the sky. I've seen them too, because you see a lot of that as well. And what we call shooting stars, I would say, are not really shooting stars. What they really are UFOs. A lot of times people are told, once we are told they're shooting stars, people stop looking, because like, oh, that's nice, and make a wish upon a shooting star, all that. But we just took people's word for it at face value that, that's all it is. So it's like there's a main narrative of like a government department will say, oh, you should expect a meteor shower tonight, and this is what time it'll come at, and don't worry about it. That's great. It's going to be nice. But who said that there really are that? Now, in some cases they are. In some cases they genuinely are. But you have to understand there is a web of lies around this, and there's an intention to try and keep a status quo the same in terms of what we question about the world and our environment and everything. So, but when you keep peeling back the layers, you start seeing it's quite thin. The veil is thin of the lies, and you can start seeing it way easier. You know, when you keep questioning in that way, and if you're lucky enough to have an encounter like I did, many encounters, you it's undeniable. It's incredible. Like I've had interactions where I had my phone and I was using like the light on the phone, and I intermittently sending a signal out up, like directing it up to the sky at night when it was a clear night. And I got a light bulb sort of a flashbacks in sequence back to me. So there was a direct correspondence an intelligent one in relation to what I had sent. So it blew my mind when that happened. And apart from that, the physics of what I saw were just staggering. Like it is staggering. It blows your mind because it starts on one side of the sky and it shoots across super fast, like way faster, as fast as your eye can move across the sky. And for me, it's easy for my eye to do the turn. But to think of the distance that's traversing in that one moment, I don't know how thousand miles in that second to go across. Like that, I mean, incredible speeds and the luminosity it can deliver at that speed. And then it looks different to when I said a shooting star. You can actually see the difference because now that I know of the context of the science of it now, I can see that there's a plasma trail that is left from the UFO, and you can see it's like a white, and it dissipates like light going out. It does, as opposed to a burning up of ions in the atmosphere, which would be maybe a meteor, or it's completely different, or a shooting star. The way it looks even looks different. It's very clear light. It's not disintegrating, fading light. It's correct light. It just stops at the right moment. Do you get me? So there's something you can distinguish in terms of its artificial nature. You can see that, I think. So that's really where it came from.
Can I ask as well, when you were having the experience of the feedback, when you were flashing your light and you were getting the same mirrored back to you, how did that feel for you? What was happening for you in that moment?
I was at a really exploratory stage in my life anyway. I was just like those questioning stages, and the more I questioned, the more I got answers, and that was just incredible. Like it was so exciting to know that if you actually have the interest and you're always asking yourself, well, like, am I crazy? Is this and that? And you have to stress, and in a way, it's no harm to stress test yourself. You don't want to just believe in anything either. It's really important to be grounded in some sort of level of reality, whatever that means. But as in just to be honest with yourself more from that perspective. And if you're lying to yourself and about what you saw and you did, that becomes dubious. That's a problem. But if everything, you can only speak to what is real for you, what you experienced at the time. And if you can stick to that with honesty, I think that's really important on this journey if you really care about answers. But going back to what did you ask again, just to...
When you were like flashing your light and you were getting the same feedback back, what was happening to your body? Like what was going on the inside of you when you actually got that recognition back, the communication really?
Yeah, just like my heart, like it's like like you almost get a fright. It's like a fright, like you got a spook, like someone jumped out of the closet or something, joking or whatever. You get that initial fright, and then my heart was like racing more when I saw it the first time, and then a sense of not of joy, or sort of like a sense that it's an honor. It's a sense like you're being honored at this moment, and that because I guess maybe we do want to believe in these things on some level. We're hardwired to believe there's more than what we are told, the physical, practical nature of reality that we're told. And maybe there's a part of that that's maybe why I was so excited about it. But more the realization that there's actually reality, that it is real. There's no, it's not just, because we can convince ourselves that we came up with all sorts of, we have a great imagination, so we can convince ourselves that it was just a satellite, it was just this or just that, because that's how we've been programmed to think about reality. And it is a programming. It's like that imagination, there would be nothing, no matter would exist at all without imagination. And that's the fundamental thing. So, but we've been convinced that to minimize the imagination, shrink it up, put it in a box and say that's exactly what reality is. And And the more that's a foolish endeavor to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of scientists have fallen into that category at the moment, where they're dogmatic with it. They're letting themselves be put into this box, and they may have been taught in that manner, but it's become too dogmatic, too religious in its connotations. The whole practice of science and learning about our environment and everything around us, and that's kind of a handicap that we are suffering from, some sort of delusion in the science world at the moment, and
Well,
maybe
it's so
more
boring.
It is,
It's
but I think
boring. It's just so
yeah,
boring. It's just they remove the life from all of it. They remove the spark and the humanity of it. It's all like down to facts. They drain the interest out of it when they do that.
yeah, and I think that's intentional, because
Mm,
once the life force is taken out of it, why you bother pursuing it? Sure, that's been taken care of. Don't worry about it. Like, some other guy got a Nobel Peace Prize for something on the topic, but never found it out the deeper answers, and that's enough. We'll leave it at that. It's
yeah.
this gatekeeper mentality, and there's a good few of them out. And gatekeepers are just people who have been given accolades early, ahead of time, to try and say that this has been sorted and you don't need to, no further investigation is required. So it's such a crazy concept that even exists. And
Mm,
what that ends up doing is, because people are so trusting, there's a pyramid step kind of a relationship of knowledge at the top trickling down. And the knowledge at the top is only the knowledge from a certain point of view. And that's being sent down and being told as fact, as if it's absolute truth. And that's, you saw that with the pandemic stuff, but more importantly with everything. The more you investigate, the more you see that it's in every part of our fabric of our existence, that it's
mm.
this one voice only matters approach. Do you know?
Yeah, I find that I actually spent my whole life just knowing that that was so, and it didn't have any reflection on my own reality or my own experience. That was very evident to me when I was a child, that that was so limiting to even contemplate such a narrow-minded point of view or idea, that I always had my own self-inquiry, and I've always been very grateful to my own soul for that, and for always pushing me to the edge of madness time and time and time again, only to realize that that's not madness, that's actually my truth. And
Hmm.
the truth is so varied, as much as a human is so varied. There's so many truths. And if there's not one truth, there's multiple truths for different types of beings. And I actually think I sent you a video recently. I was I was driving down the road, and I saw this big black balloon, and it was floating, but I thought it was a balloon. But then when it got closer, it was like two sizes of
Hmm.
it. I have an Audi, and if you put two Audis together, that's like the size of your bedroom. It was big,
Yeah.
and this thing was coming. It was floating towards where I was. I was going to go past it, and I decided to. Nobody saw it. Nobody was looking at it. That's what kind of got me. I was looking at everyone
Hmm.
around. Nobody was even looking up, and this thing was gliding. So I decided to take a sharp right and turn into an estate to get out of my car to film this. And then
Yeah.
when I got out of my car, because I had to pass it and then go right, and then I got out of my car and it was gone.
Hmm.
But then it wasn't gone, and I looked up and it was directly above me. So
Wow.
I had to go back. A balloon doesn't go back and take it. It was directly above me. And I just kind of thought, ooh, I thought, and I just filmed it. And what was interesting to me was I felt nothing. To me, it could have been, I just felt nothing.
Hmm.
I'm very empathic. Like, I feel stuff. I'm very
Yeah.
good at
Yeah. Yeah.
reading stuff. I can read pretty much anything, but there was zero read on this. So I was like, well, whatever. If it's a UFO, or if I think you said it might be a spy balloon. I was like, whatever it is, it's there. And what really interested me more than that was that anyone who was on the ground wasn't seeing it. Nobody was looking at it.
Interesting.
So I also think that some people see and some people don't, because they don't want to see.
Well, it's out of their frequency bandwidth. It's so
Definitely.
so it's a huge part of it is, but even if it was in the sky and they physically there in our realm, let's say, and there was a lot of people and didn't see it, is because it doesn't compute with their programming of what they think reality should be, which is their frequency bandwidth, And even though it's there, they won't register it on a conscious level that it's even there. And then on some subconscious level, it could be filed into just literally a balloon. It could be filed into any sort of thing if it in the background, but it's not registered as important because that's how much we've been convinced that these things can't exist, shouldn't exist, don't exist. And
yeah, okay. So someone like me comes along, and I just know what is real in my reality. And I know that those things do exist as much as I exist. And when I saw this thing, it was just like, well, so what? I'm going to film it because you don't see it all the time. But it didn't. My response to it was just so interesting. So I have a few questions here for you, right? And the first question I want to know about is actual humans. Where do humans come from? Like, what is it that makes us up?
So there is an ancient story that it's 1,000,000 years old story. This story has been carried through the races over many times, many generations. This story is the human story is said to even be to know what we even say what we need to classify what a human is first to really answer that question. And what a human is just an extraterrestrial that has stayed on Earth. That's how we would classify human. That's all it is. And more importantly, an extraterrestrial that has come to Earth that is humanoid looking, meaning 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, 2 legs, and arms. That is a humanoid figure, we could say. But once we have stayed on Earth, we have on Earth a situation. We have the Van Allen radiation bands, which are electromagnetic bands or radiation that covers the whole entire Earth. And because of those bands, it's caused the people that live in it to have a veil of forgetfulness, number one. But number two, their DNA has less source signaling coming to it. So to explain that, there is a source, I believe anyway, there's a source signal that comes from the universe, which is what animates all consciousness, this source signaling. And when humans are on Earth, that veil, that kind of, it's never severed. It can never be severed, that connection between the source and us. It can never be, because we're immersed in it. So and that you could call that ether as well. That's the same. You could call, if you want to use the word God, ether. You could really, and that would make a lot of sense in terms of the scientific model. But humans, what makes us human is the collection of ideas that we hold. And all those ideas that we hold is based on, it's like we're in a bubble of our own thoughts and emotions and ideas. And we really are it is like a bubble because of the radiation bands on Earth. We are living in a dense third density matrix. So the word density means the frequency and vibration that make up the reality that we hold. So a density, and that is confused often with dimensions. So a dimension, really, in its strictest terms, is shapes. Your dimensions. You're seeing. So first dimension, 1 line, 2 lines together, 3 lines for three dimensions, 4 dimensions. You know what I mean? And eventually you get a tesseract, which is a bigger one, or a dodecahedron, which is a bigger shape again, all connected in. So we kind of view that as a dimension, which is more accurate because it's the shapes. But a density is just the frequency band that we hold, and that really is what all your ideas make up. So if we have been put into this sort of an environment, an artificial environment is what we really, really have been put into, which is a third density artificial frequency band, is what we're kind of being sustained in that frequency band.
Yeah.
And why? And the question maybe is why, right? So
Why
the question, why have we been put in that, is because the Earth, going back to human history, the Earth was 12,500 years ago, went through an enormous cataclysm called the Younger Dryas period. And that's what scientists are calling it now. It's an emerging science, and evidence is showing all over the world of these floods, and not only the physical evidence of it, but based on erosion and everything, but actually the myths, the things that we call myths are actually closer to fact. And a lot of these tribes and ancient peoples knew this, and they've recorded it. That was in all there. And just because someone in more modern science in the last few hundred years said these are myths, or even last 100 years is actually when they were really classified as myths. As time goes back, if you look at any of the older books, you realize that they call them, these are just stories that their ancestors told about Viyamanas, for example, they were called, and they were really just flying ships that their ancestors told. And in Mexico, there's a pyramid in there, and it refers to the Teotihuacan pyramid of the sun, I think is what that one is. And ultimately, there's a myth of Quetzalcoatl is his name, is the name of this god or deity that had come down to Earth. And Quetzalcoatl is the feathered serpent. That's what it really means. And the feathered serpent, what they worshipped back then, was actually not a person or a god, but it was a ship. It was a UFO. And it was because it makes sense. If you look at the how the plasma of the turbines of the engines react with our atmosphere, it creates a trail. And so when just in the same way as a jet stream works on an airplane, that's exactly what they had back then. So it would have, that was the fired serpent was, the feathered serpent was like the trail coming out the tail of it. So it looked like a dragon or a serpent that they would have thought. And it was flying in the air. So they worship that because the level of consciousness has varied since humanity's inception. And depending on what beings from different races came at different times, we have evidence all through our physical evidence and writings from as far back as that Younger Dryas period, which is 12,500 years ago. We have a huge amount of evidence. There's sites all over the world that indicate this and have it written in stone. And what ended up really happening, to give you an idea of just the general history in terms of our archaeology, we have what ended up happening was we had the original stonework, which was far superior than our technology today to even engineer and cut stones and make them and even bring them places. They're so heavy that stuff was the original, which I would say pre-flooding technology. That was, and we still have evidence of that now. But then as time went on, like 6,000 years ago, a lot of societies would have adapted to use that stuff and claimed it as their own. Oh, they came up with these things. Because it was just like, well, from the ancient Egyptian times, that's what they did. They claimed that they did the pyramids and other people did. So the timelines are a bit unusual. But all these monuments are very hard to actually carbon date, and because carbon dating is notoriously bad in its own right. It's not accurate. It's really not accurate, and it's not the only metric that can actually assess time of an object. If you really want to accurately measure anything, you need to use a frequency map. Because all reality is based on frequencies, energy, and vibration. A frequency map is the best way. But often what we do is, what our scientists and archaeologists are doing, they're using our timeline that we've been told, and we're basing. So you're getting into time really here and how time even works. But we're using, ultimately, we should be, the perceptual agreements of all humanity, we're using markers and just trying to count back, estimate what it could be, to go back 1,000 years, 2,000 years, based on a marker of an event maybe that happened. Whether it was World War I, a big, like Hitler came. So if we measure, okay, from the current day to that time, what does that feel like? Okay, let's multiply that back. And that's only estimating it, really. To be honest, you need to actually have frequency map data, but that can be mapped out and traced back based on major events.
But what about where did humans come from?
So like I said to you, that Younger Dryas period, that's where all these, what ended up happening was, we're going back to really, the story really starts officially by a million years ago, even though I do believe personally that it goes way back further than that. But a million years ago is just the time that it was recorded since.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just got to let my cat in.
Yeah.
Come on, stop scratching at the door. Sorry.
Yeah.
Cats love these conversations. So go on, go back to, let's just say, time is irrelevant, but let's say a million.
So the million years ago is when we were supposed to have come from, this is the official narrative, is that we were supposed to come from the constellation Lyra, all humanity, which is things that look like us, basically, very like us, come from the constellation Lyra. And that there was a thing called the Great Expansion. And the Great Expansion refers to the human-looking race that was attacked from apparently a peaceful race of human-looking people were attacked from a reptilian force coming from another density, and that's the official narrative. And then humans were loving and peaceful and had no. We had technology, but we didn't have any weaponry because it wasn't relevant, or we had never needed it.
Nice.
So when the humans were attacked by this reptilian force, it devastated and decimated a huge population in that star system. So what they had to do is they had to expand and go to look for other planets to survive, because they were being hunted down by this reptilian force. Now, this is the official story. There's questions within it, but let's just continue on with that. That's the official narrative on it. And that one of the planets that was the world here where we're living in, and that's that we went to here. And one of a great actually connection to maybe the truth on this would be, if you look at some of the old cave paintings on the walls. There's ones in France that are 40,000 years old, 50,000 years old, of hand painting. They're just hands, overlapping hands on the wall, and that was a human faction that was fleeing reptilian forces, and they wanted it was just to remind people that they were there and to let them know what they went through, and at that time, because time, and they knew exactly the ink, they knew exactly the paints and the chemicals to use so it would actually last, which is incredible in its own right. And they weren't just like cave dwellers who had nonsense ideas, and that's really the narrative that's been painted about that. So that going back to the origins of humanity, to be called, you could really say that the human race as we know it, which is what we are now, started 12,500 years ago. And I say that because, as I said at the very beginning, the collection of ideas that individuals hold is what creates the race. So really it all changed around that time, because our ideas were governed and controlled and manipulated, particularly at that time. So just to give you a bit of context to all that, on Earth, before the floods happened, there was two major civilizations. There was the Atlantean, and then there was the Lemurian. And the Atlantean civilization was predominantly reptilian based. There was humans there, and then the Lemurian one was factions of the ET races, like the Pleiadians and others, that had settled, and all human looking. These two, right? The humans on Atlantis were human looking, and then so were the Lemurian colony, all of them. But they were ETs, meaning it was like a spaceport. You could come in and out at any time. So the reptilian factions pre-Atlantis were just beginning they were trying to control humanity, and really manipulate them completely so they could use them, basically farm them for energy, for resources, and for their physical bodies. So what the reptilians did is they murdered all the parents of the human race, which were called the Adamic race at the time, and kept only the children. And the reason they did this was to try and reset our thinking. So they knew that to understand how DNA works is they knew a lot about it. Right? So what they knew about human race is that the collection of ideas is what makes the DNA what it is, and that's what our reality is, how it is. It's related to our reality too. So they knew if they really wanted to change and alter the DNA of humans, they needed to change how they thought. And that is a key thing of today. It's so important for today, because everything on TV and everything on your Facebook, on all your media, Twitter, everything is about manipulating ideas and consciousness and how we think about ourselves and the world around us. If you can understand that, you understand this is 1,000-year-old this agenda from that time frame.
Hasn't changed.
Yeah. And so when you go back to that time pre-Atlantis, just pre-flooding, humans were naked without knowledge, and that is what the Adam and Eve story literally translates to. The Adamic race were naked. They didn't have the understanding and the conceptual awareness or the framework to empower themselves, because in reality humans are far more strong in their creative power because they have a high source attention. source signaling comes to humans have. So they knew this, and they were attempting to, they tried a few times to try and genetically modify humans, the genetics of their strands, our DNA, but found that every time they did it, the genetics, the wiring, if you want to call it that, reversed. So because the source signal of humanity is so strong to God, if you want to call it that, that it has a default setting where it reverts back. This is the key thing to all how evolution works and everything, and this is where lies are spread about evolution. That there is a source signaling that will bring all life in the universe back to a coding, like a signature of it's like the hand of the source. It's like the signature of it. And what the reptilians knew, and they were studying back then, was how do we keep the changes permanent so we can make it easier to control the humans.
Yeah.
And they did that by ideology, just like it's happening today. It's very linked to today. Nothing's changed other than new technology has been introduced, which is what the COVID was about. So we're getting into that. Well, let's keep going back to the original time.
Yeah, original time, because it's mirroring now into our reality.
It really is. It's culminating into some major event that's happening this year, I would think, up to next year. We're into the conclusion of it all.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, exactly. Stay tuned. I know. Well, we can wait for that one.
I know. Yeah, it's coming anyway.
Yeah, and so humanity really formed. What happened was then the remaining survivors, the Adamic race of that time frame, they were indoctrinated with the new teachings and the teachings of what reptilians wanted us to think and believe, down to how we reason and the mathematics, how we view about the world and how big the universe is. All those concepts were seeded then.
Wow.
And what that actually ended up happening as a result of all that, we atrophied our genetics. We atrophied the DNA, meaning it shrunk. It never goes away. We still have a full, complete strand of DNA. We just have inactive DNA, which scientists today call junk DNA. They know it's there. They can see it. They just think it's not doing anything, and they don't really understand why it's even there. But it's just based on our belief systems is why it's inactive and it's still in that standby mode, if you want to call it that. Because our belief systems, and the more we shrink our consciousness, we believe that we're the only ones in the universe. We believe that life is cruel and evolution is this way, where it's a step pyramid, we're this, and we end up in this, and everything's out to get us. If we believe that every day, that shrinks our DNA and it disempowers us, and now we can introduce religion to this, because that's really what came next later down the line, thousands of years later. But even just before that, once that going back to the colony, the Adamic race in Atlantis, something happened at that time when humanity was enslaved, that the Adamic race had the Eves of the story, which is going back to the Adam and Eve story. The Eves of the story were the females, right? And just the females of the race. But they weren't only that. They were also the Pleiadians and other human-looking races, were particularly the Pleiadians in this case, from Lemuria and externally came in, snuck in, if you want to call it that, pretending to be the Homo Adamic race, to try and they spread knowledge and what I'm spreading today. They were talked about this stuff to the Adamic race to empower them, and it really did, to reactivate their DNA, because they were naked without knowledge. And the snake in the story of Adam and Eve represents knowledge, because the snake represents the female faction, the Pleiadians of the time, who came in to tell. Because in most of history, snake can be symbolized in a few different ways, but it's either knowledge or the female. And that's why you see the caduceus symbol as snakes going up of the medical symbol, because it's affecting our DNA, how you believe about ourselves. That's what it literally means. Knowledge is, because it's all manipulating our thoughts and how we feel about ourselves. And that's what medicine really is, ultimately, because the symbolization is everywhere. You just got to see it. And even though I'm telling a fantastical story and you may not believe it, the evidence is all over once you know how to look at it, what you're looking at even. It gives massive context, and the truth becomes more and more evident. That's what's fascinating about this. As bizarre as this may seem, like I was very very skeptical at the start of any of this journey. Like, what am I talking about? Aliens, that this is all crazy talk. But if you can drop that and drop your ego and just see it objectively, the information, see, can you interpret it? Does it make any sense? Is there any links? And the story unfolds. It's as bizarre as it is. It just is that.
It delivers itself, doesn't it? When you open your mind.
And when you open your mind, that's the key thing. And if you can shake your limiting belief systems and your attachments, that becomes way easier.
Yeah, it does. So what makes a human then?
Well, is the collection of ideas that it holds. That's it. Okay. That's the number one thing. Wow. So we weren't manipulated in a lab like most people think. The Sumerian tablets talk about the Anunnaki, those who came from above, that came down and changed their genetics, and there were a lot of them were reptilians that did that. They didn't actually. The reptilians, for the most part, couldn't change humanity's genetics because they just weren't. The source signal is so strong, like I said, and there was certain adaptations that occurred with certain individuals at the time, but they didn't last. They'd only last a generation 2 max. They can't sustain it. That change always goes back. So, Brilliant. So that's a great thing. That's in our favor, to be honest with you. That's why there's always an agenda of good versus evil, because our source signaling, we keep waking up as soon as the gig is up, and we're at that pinnacle moment now where humanity knows there's something off. The COVID was really off, and people were like, "What is going on here?" And people who didn't believe any of this now started questioning, "Well, is this even a topic? What we're talking about today?" And that's called expanding our consciousness. So that's what we're doing now, which in essence is waking up our DNA again. And the faster that we wake up and activate our DNA, the quicker they're going to have to try and kill people or try and reveal themselves for the monsters that they are behind the scenes. It's like with the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. Do not look over here, and he's pulling the rings. I am God, and I'm the Great Oz. That's exactly what's happening. And the Great Oz is only a small little bald man, and that's exactly what it is with the Cabal today. You could fit them in a room, a large room. You could fit all the people that are trying to really control the world and have influence.
I'm sorry, Daniel, but those people, let's say the Cabal, are their consciousness, because you're covering consciousness and DNA and the human collective now, but the consciousness of the Cabal, or those that are actually creating this paradigm that we're all seem to be trapped in until we kind of wake up and go, hold on, pull back the curtain and go, that veil doesn't exist. I perceived it to be real, therefore it became so. But now that I've known it to be something else, it removes itself. And then you see a whole new way of looking at life. But what is the consciousness of the Cabal? You call them the Cabal. So what are they plugging into? Are they plugging into, I know the origins, you're saying in the beginning, they created all these different realities and killed the parents and programmed that younger generation to believe in a structure. So that's just copy and pasted onto generation. And now we're at a point where time's running out because we're coming back to wake up again. So do you think that the monsters are going to be revealed and the Cabal's consciousness will be revealed, or that we'll just go back to sleep and start again,
Well, that's a great question, because it's like a game of chess or Monopoly. Maybe it's a Monopoly board more so, that there's a lot of players in it, and there's a lot of starseeds, which are humans looking. A starseed really is somebody who's come usually from another planet or part of the universe, that has intentionally decided to incarnate on Earth, knowing that it's the only planet that has that super dense third energy density on it, where there's a veil of forgetfulness, and then they can experience these crazy things, from hardships to love and music and art. They can experience these things in their most extreme form that exists in the universe, because no other planet has this density, this artificial third density. Everywhere else is fifth density as a minimum level, because the source signaling is not interrupted. So all planets have that minimum level of fifth density, other than Earth. So consciousness. Go back to consciousness. Talk about the consciousness. What is consciousness? Our consciousness, and the consciousness of the Cabal. The consciousness of the Cabal, yeah. So who are the Cabal? Maybe is a good way of putting it, because that's really the Cabal themselves are the factions of humanity from the time, this is a key moment, during the time of Nefertiti and Akhenaten, the pharaohs, they were the start of the Cabal, really. The Cabal aren't the Reptilians necessarily. That's just a higher faction. Now you're getting into the interstellar level of Cabal. But the Cabal predominantly is the humans, the corrupt humans that run the secret societies that started from the time of Nefertiti and Akhenaten. And to give context to that, King Akhenaten was Moses. So the story of Moses and the exile of Egypt comes from the ideas that Akhenaten was trying to impose upon the people, but he was only doing that because he was instructed by Nefertiti, and Queen Nefertiti was the brains behind the operation, and her origins came from Ireland, and before that from Atlantis. So her knowledge came originally from Atlantis, and after the flooding happened, she was from Ireland and went to Egypt, and there's a huge link between Ireland and Egypt because of that, because the knowledge that was being lost at that time once the cataclysm happened, because it was a horrendous death everywhere, and the frequency of the planet was dropping at an enormous rate. It had to be stabilized, actually, and that's what the Van Allen bands came from, is to stabilize the electromagnetic poles. But moving back to the Akhenaten times, he was Moses effectively, but what he did was, the commandments he got from God are the beginning of the manipulation to try and turn us into a monotheistic belief system where there's only one deity. Everything else is you only worship one thing. That's why, if you see in the story of Moses, that he was warned not to. He gave out to his followers for believing in the bull and the following of false idols. But all the bull is Taurus, constellation Taurus, the constellation, because that is where a lot of our ancestors came from, and the belief systems and the knowledge of how to even get to that constellation using technology or natural portals is what they were trying to eradicate. All this original knowledge of who we really were and where we came from. So that's a huge thing, and that's the basis behind the war in Gaza today, and what's happening between Palestine and the Israelis. See, at the top level, at the most expanded level, the Cabal, one of their main factions are the Israelis. From there, at the top level, are the Cabal, and they're running the show because they believe in. If you were to break down, what does Israel mean? Israel means is for Isis, Rael for Ra, the god Ra, and El for Elohim. So they don't actually believe, that's all star-based belief systems. That's actually not, but they're the ones who are the Jesuits who are running the world, who are telling us about that Christ is the one, and the story of the Bible is all the truth. Yeah. So, it's a double standard. There's so many double standards you see every day, and it saddens me to see that people get triggered so easily and fight each other. Yes, you could say with the Israel conflict that, the people of Israel, they came here later. They came later to that land, or they think it was their own land because they came from Akhenaten's time, which is Moses. They think that they were the chosen ones. They were only chosen because they were chosen to be the persecuted ones, actually, and so they would be protected. That's literally what you have today going on in modern politics. They're still pulling that agenda. They have to be considered the defenseless ones, so everyone rows into the little guy. But in reality, they're the most funded. They have all the weapons. They have everything, and they are the likes of the Rothschild family and all these old families, the Orsinis, and these guys are all coming from that Israel faction because they believe they know the truth. They have all the original information because that's their part of those deep secret societies that retained that information, while the rest of humanity fell further and further away from their deep roots and their conscious awareness.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you though, relation to DNA or blood, do they all belong to a particular type of DNA or a particular type of bloodline or a particular type of consciousness? They're all linked. You're the Israels, like the Cabals.
Yeah.
Do they all have a...
Well, so they believe massively in bloodlines and connecting the genetics to the original bloodlines. And the bloodlines that they're really looking for are origins of humanity pre-Atlantis, and going back to where humans really, because I did tell you the human story, and that from the perspective of 12,500 years ago from till now, which is only based on our belief system, our genetic coding. But you can't really accurately say that humans started at this time or that time.
Sure.
But if you were to give a time, there's another story going around, and I'm inclined to believe this because it makes more sense with the big picture, the bigger picture, is that humans come from a genetic branch of organic hominids, like an ape-like creatures on the earth. I'm talking 375,000 years ago, and that time frame there was species on the planet. But to be honest with you, there's all sorts of species have come and go at different times over millions of years. That would be my overall view on it. But if you're to narrow it down,
like mongrels.
Yes, exactly. And to narrow it down, though, I would say that we were artificially manipulated from those apes, the curious humans that showed interest. And there was a Syrian race from constellation Sirius B, particularly, came to Earth and seeded the planet. This is where you're mixing up with the Sumerian tablet idea and the gold and everything, the mining of the gold, and it gets kind of confused a little bit here. I don't know if people know that, but ultimately, this is the story the other parallel story that I have come across, which it seems solid, is that humans were artificially genetically changed and altered from 21 different races, but the whole project started from a man called Tanaku, who was the captain of this ship, of the Syrian, this massive biosphere ship that looks like the moon, that came to Earth, and the idea being that that entity would have known that set and setting is everything, and the frequencies of the stars have a massive impact on each planet, and the alignment of all those and timing is everything. And they knew that when they happened to be there at that time, and there's a spiritual connection that individual had to know that this needed to be seeded at this time, and that it seems to have taken 30,000 years for humanity to evolve, but artificially evolve, to bring us to this way we are. You see, there's two factions of humanity now, and one of them is the root faction of how it all starts is from the ENK branch, which was in the Sumerian tablets is called the Enki branch, and the ENL branch, which is the other one, Enlil branch. And in the story we've been told in the Sumerian tablets is that that the Enki branch were the good ones and the Enlil were the bad. But it's actually the reverse, because the Cabal got their hands on it and manipulated the story. So the ENL branch was the root branch of extraterrestrial DNA, the dominant extraterrestrial DNA branch that mixed with the ENK branch, which was the manipulation of humans, the primates at the planet with the ETs. So what you had is, though, that Syrian genetic branch. So that individual and those individuals at that time would have had to take a huge sacrifice of their lives and who they were, because they had to, in essence, almost de-evolve to match to start linking the frequency with the primates that existed on the planet to begin with. So you need to start, if you want to start a race, you need to start with what exists, what's found naturally in nature first. They knew that. So to make it more robust, the genetic strands. So they understood that our DNA today is super robust, meaning the changes doesn't change quite that quickly, and it can take a lot of toxins and all abuse and not low oxygen and all sorts of things. And what we really have today is a meat suit, really. And I would say it links back to this original time of 400,000 years ago, around that time frame, where the branches of the primates that existed on the planet organically were mixed with the extraterrestrial DNA. But these Syrians that began this project got others involved after to keep completing our DNA, to layer it, to add more information coding in it, because DNA is just stored information. That's really all it is. Okay. And what you can do is and all that stored information comes from just ideas, literally. At a very source level, it's ideas. and it just fixes itself in a certain pattern that we look like at that strand, that helix, is only stays in that because it's the frequency. Once it's modulated because it's stable, because our belief systems are stable. That's why it stays in that shape and that look and in that form. So that's a big thing. So
no, I know it is. There's so much information about the humans and where we come from and what we are and what your mind can take in and what your mind will eject.
And if you going back to the Israel thing, they believe, and they are the ENK branch of humanity, and the ENL branch were the more spiritually inclined, with a higher propensity of ET DNA in their coding. So they were and what happens to to souls, if you want to call it that, or entities as they evolve, if you want to call it that, is that the more you expand your consciousness, you become eventually immaterial. You become out of the visible spectrum because your frequency is raised so high that physicality is not important anymore for you. You don't need to be considered Biba in one body. There I am. You can speak to me. This is who I am. And this point of attention, you can actually, you are non-local. You are everywhere and all the time. And this is where our angel stories come from, the idea that Archangel Michael will be there, even though he's in a different realm, he can help us no matter where we are. And that is actually true based on quantum physics. But just the ENK branch were the negative regressive ones that Moses and Akhenaten, who is Akhenaten, prescribed to. He was the branch that branch of ENK branch was, the genetics were way slower to change. So they didn't actually, because they were rooted in such the dominant frequency was rooted in the primate DNA, that it wasn't changing too quickly, which means it was less fast to evolve, but it would stay rooted. So what you this is the really root of all the wars on Earth are based on this idea that the ENK branch, in the earlier days, would mix with the ENL branch, and the ENL branch they had councils together where they would evolve each other along, bring each other along as time went on, and they mated even with the ENK mated with the ENL as time, and then you had the gods of our story in Greek mythology, for example. A lot of that was the demigods and hemigods, and all these versions are just branches off the ENK or ENL branch. The ENL branch, as I said, is more ET dominant DNA, whereas the ENK was all more root race. So what the problem was, the ENK branch became increasingly stubborn and less willing to adopt the ideas of the advanced ideology of the universe and everything else. So then you had wars, and one of the biggest wars that ever happened was about 35,000 years ago, called the Tarsus War, and that was a huge war between these two factions of races. That was, forgetting about reptilians here. This is just human-looking races fighting each other over dominance of trying to find out trying to get dominance on knowledge and wisdom, because the ENL branch realized that the ENK branch were becoming increasingly more warlike and less spiritually involved, that they started separating and then went into their own little underground places where they would actually be able to stay away and kind of keep their own. They started just separating into their own bubbles, let's say, so they wouldn't be influenced by their negative ideas, because ideas are toxic, and if you seed negative ideas on any planet, it will grow into more negative thoughts and patterns, which attracts more of the negative, of the same of what you are. In the same way as if you're positive, you attract more of what that is. So a defense mechanism against a toxic species like who are negative is to not become a frequency match with them by being of a higher frequency. So they can't even reach you to fight you. That's why they say you can. If you go down to their level, you're fighting at their level. I mean, it's literally the same, that you're out of their frequency band if you're a higher frequency person. So how to disrupt that would be to mix low vibrational ideas in a high vibrational species.
Yeah.
That's how you would infiltrate it. And that's what the Earth is. The Earth is full of that, is full of low vibrational ideas, porn, fighting, stabbings, concepts of hatred and duality,
COVID.
all these. Oh yeah, I mean that's the key. Yeah.
That was the biggie.
So the E and K and E and L branches are just frequencies at a base level. That's what they represent. There's other letters after it, which just represent, because names are more than just names, inanimate names. They're free feelings, they're frequencies, they're energies, they're ideas, and that's what ET races label themselves as through these frequencies, because those that are in line with these concepts, that's how because they understand that any race is only considered a race because of their ideas. So
it sounds like it's gotten a bit out of hand, this whole thing on Earth.
It has, and our DNA is quite robust at the moment in terms of, like, it's incredible to me how much humans are not impacted, how we haven't all died off based on the amount of toxins that we're fed to our bad food, to fluoride in the water, through poor hospital quality, poor the systematic failure on people. Yet we thrive in loads of ways because we're so strong and our source signal is so strong. So that would be my overall view on it, is that if people knew all this stuff, they don't even know how much they're being attacked, yet they're able to defend against it. Imagine what they'd know with a little bit of knowledge. And that's really encouraging. So
I agree. And there's a lot there that I'm going to have to listen to this a few times to really be able to absorb what you're saying. So where does all the pyramids and Göbekli Temple, where does all this stuff fit in to our human story?
That's a good question, because once after the flooding happened, the poles of the Earth, the electromagnetic poles of the Earth started that were changing dramatically in a huge rate. And if they kept shifting like they were, the whole planet would be lost forever. And what happened was, the reason that this shift happened in the first place is because there was a planet called Tiamat, and that planet was a water planet, and it looked like a second sun from Earth from the view 13,000 years ago. If you were to stand on Earth looking up at the sky, you'd see what looked like two suns. One was the actual sun, and one was the reflection of the sun onto another planet called Tiamat, which is a water-based planet. So what ended up happening was, Saturn was quite close to Earth too at the time, and you could see it. It had no rings on it at the time, and it was way closer to Earth. So what happened was, a reptilian faction attacked this planet Tiamat, and basically as a distress signal was sent to Tiamat, pretending to be other humans looking for help, and it was actually a decoy. It was a setup. The reptilians were on the planet, so when the members, the human faction, came to that planet to try and help them, there was a big war. It was a trap, and there was a huge war, and that's what the Orion Wars we call today are based on. And that created, they basically blew the planet up, and because it was a nuclear weapon, a weapon that was like nuclear, which had a chain effect on the water, and on the planet it just basically created a massive explosion, and the whole planet ended up blowing up, and the water from that planet came to Earth. And that's what the floods are in the Bible story, and that's why we have so much water on the planet. But there's also, it carried a lot of, people say karma, but it's carried a lot of toxic energy, and because when so many souls die at one time, it's enormous problem, obviously. Right. And there was a lot of hold on one sec. She's not here.
She's not here. She's been abducted.
Yeah, exactly. She's gone with them.
She'll be back later.
Yeah.
Now I know where you're getting your information from.
Yeah, Matt. Yeah. She just beams it in every now and again,
So the water is a mirror for its environment. It's reflecting the consciousness. We know that, right? So water will, if you drink that glass of water you just took there, there's a woman that's actually proven that if she took a drop of that water and froze it, it would have a picture of your face on it.
Yeah. And that's based on the holographic principle, that the smallest molecules on the Earth are the same, are the exact same as the largest.
Yeah.
And they're no different or less value. So they're all just mirrors of themselves, or the smallest or the biggest mirror. And they're no less, which is how a hologram really works. That each constituent part is the same as its biggest part. No matter what size they are, they're all interlinked, but they're just different size, like a fractal. Well, that's what a fractal is.
I love that.
And that's really what.
That.
That's cool, no, but that's the fundamental of how life exists. It has to, based on the harmonics of the frequencies, which create those shapes. And what really creates the shapes is that source signaling, and through people create those shapes and interact with it because of their conscious intention. So they influence matter and reality based on their intention alone. And when in the Bible, I think it says something about what God breathed life into it, or he spoke words and the world existed. Well, they're really telling you there in the Bible that humanity can create something from nothing based on just thoughts and ideas and speaking. So, and on that, it's so important to know that your words have meaning and power, and they're like spells. And if you're not sure what you're saying, like, for example, if I use the word fuck, excuse my language, that word carries a huge meaning and understanding, collective understanding, a subconscious and conscious understanding around the world, what that really means. So when you use that, it creates an anchor in time and a node in time and a value of the sentiment of that word. So the sentiment of the word is potentially toxic. Let's say it's a bad thing. And the only reason it is toxic or bad is because we've given it that value. We've charged that energy to associate that word with that frequency, which is that idea. So what happens is in the universe, no matter where you're when you say a word like that, it matches every other event that used that word instantly. Like there's no separate, because you're at that, because that's that harmonic, is you're registering that harmonic and reading it like a book. And
I gotta stop cursing.
Well, if your intention behind it is not your chart, but you see, those values are not static. They change, because my value could be, you're a great fucking friend, and I'd say that means that it's a positive thing. So the word in its own right is inanimate, but if enough people believe a certain thing about that word, it solidifies itself and starts becoming a denser frequency, a more permanent frequency.
Like COVID.
And that word now has a negative connotation, and
Virus.
Before we didn't even know about it.
No.
And
if you cough now, it's like, did you do a COVID test? It's like everything comes back to COVID. So stay on the pyramids and go Beckley Temple, and tell me a little bit about the water came from that planet into this planet, and it contained a certain frequency, a certain energy, and then that was what was covering our Earth.
Yeah, and so then those flooding happened, and then the enlightened ones of the E and L branches. And basically there was the factions of Atlantis and Lemuria at the time. Lemuria was made up of a lot of E and L branches, the frequency, which is the positive side, and they fought fiercely with the Atlantean side to free up the whole planet. But once the floods came, it wiped out all the technology from both factions and created almost a clean slate. And the Reptilians didn't have any of their technology or anything; they couldn't work with what they had. So what we now call the Galactic Federation, which is a collection of species that have came together to try and protect the Earth from any event happening like that again. They're like the EU of space. They're well, in a way that's positive and negative, but they're a collection of species that came together to try and protect themselves from, for example, a massive attack from an invading force. So they would all be able to actually sustain themselves and not have it go into disarray quite quickly. But when the flooding came, they knew that the planet Earth would do that, and it would go into disarray, and they'd lose another high frequency planet. So to stop it going completely, the catastrophe to continue forever, or until it completely blew up, they had to put those Van Allen bands in to keep the radiation, to what the Van Allen bands are doing is they are amplifying the electromagnetic activity that exists coming from the planet, the poles, and they're sustaining that at a certain frequency band. And the result of that is it stabilizes the shores and the waters and our own individual frequency. So that's what they're doing, but that comes from the moon. So you're getting into that bandwidth is literally coming from the moon itself, and artificially sustaining Earth in this lower third density frequency, this heavy dense energy, that gives us all of our experience.
Can I just ask you two questions before you go on? So is this shift about that that electromagnetic frequency band being lifted from the Earth?
So what's not going to happen if they lifted the band? What you would see is we would start seeing fairies running around the place and goblins and all sorts of crazy stuff and entities. We'd look at the entities that have followed us all our lives. We'd be able to see them if they took the moon away, the frequencies away, because it would be too much it would be too great a shift from based on our reality perception now, and it would cause people to go. It would be chaos. It'd be like hell on earth, because people have no understand. Well, certain people like you and I have started, and the people who are the starseeds who are really trying to bring the frequency up of the planet are really actively trying to help us so we can lift that veil off. But ultimately, the awakened people and the people who are really evolving spiritually, the frequency of the Van Al bands doesn't apply to you so much. You can overcome them because you're literally out of that frequency band. You're higher than the frequency of that energy.
So hence you can see UFOs.
Yes, one of the reasons, but they are material, so as well. But so you can be in frequencies change all the time, which is your ideas, and depending on who you are, if you are humans are really are repeatable, measurable, and they like consistency. They like routine. They like knowing that they're getting up in the morning, the same breakfast, the same spoon. They go to the same job. There's an engineering by design, because that's our default to kind of feeling safe in that way and to keep it repeatable. But that limits our expansion. So it's like we're repeating the same stuff over and over. Your grandparents did what you do, but there's slightly different scenarios. Sure, there's a new enemy on the day, but that's all controlled, and you just go with that. And what I'm trying to say to you is, you have to actually reach for expansion of your soul and to realize we're way more than that. And I really feel that the starseeds on the planet are just trying to show people they know what it's like to be in a higher frequency band, and know what the standards and norms we should be going by are.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't accept most of the things that we accept about the atrocities that happen to people. And when people screw each other over in business, we look at each other, and it's inbuilt into the system to be corrupt, to screw over your fellow man or woman. But I am encouraged by a lot of great people within those systems doing their best, and they're still high frequency people doing their best in a crap system. But it's engineered in that way to keep it self-sustaining, to keep it terrible. And what you have is governmental bodies then just giving you snapshots of a relief, like, oh, we gave you 300 quid off your electricity bill, even though we jacked it up to €1,000 that day. I mean, you know, but
I only had an affair with 2 people, not 10. It's like, but I just want to stay where about the band across that field across the earth to contain all sorts of things. And you say about 2024 something's going to shift. What is in your reality and your perception of what is that you're talking about?
My reality is, what happens is there's a load of chess players on the board, and we've all come from different aspects and different understandings of what the universe is, and we all come to Earth, and there's a lot of souls that have keep reincarnating on the Earth and caught in this loop, and they're caught in the corruption, and they don't know the wood from the trees anymore. They don't know what they really should be like to be whole again. So they're constantly in traumatic states. And what the starseeds are doing is are giving them the light and saying, no, this is what we should be. This is what we can be. And what were you saying based on that?
I know, because actually my work with regression hypnosis is all about that. And yesterday I was with a lady who, it really affected me, her human story. It was just very brutal, and how I got to do a role reversal and speak to her dad about why he did that. And it just goes back and back and back and back. It's just in the gene pool, the behaviors and the programs and the ideas and your way of viewing life. And then I say to them, look at it this way. And they always cry and go, I never thought of it like that. I never perceived that to be so. And so I know what you're talking about, very much so. But you're talking about in 2024 things are going to change. What's the change?
The change in 24 is it's when the culmination of all these players that start coming to the end of the game, the end game. It's how did their influence materialize to become the reality that we now hold? So it's like all of them converging and figuring out, well, what is this conclusion? So it's uncharted, it's unknown yet. Only the source will know what actually is happening. We're just playing our role, what we feel is best for us.
That's
And
right.
it is a battle of wills, in a sense that who knows what the ultimate outcome will be. But what I do know is it's unnatural what's happening on Earth in every way. It's not the natural current of the universe. And the more that becomes apparent because we're waking up, the more it'll be eradicated. Even knowing that you're limitless and that you don't need to listen to a set of instructions to be enough is enough to free you going forward, and that you write the code. You don't need other people to insert their ideas on you to make that the truth. Your truth is what your truth is, which is perfectly valid. But to know that you don't have to give your power away for your truth to exist. And that's the most important thing. And what will happen in 2024 is unknown. And I don't want to see if I say there's going to be a world war, then that's in your head and that's influence. Or if I say it's going to be peace or the ETs will come down, I don't. But I can give you an educated guess based on what the trends are going. Is that
give me an uneducated guess?
The uneducated guess would be, yeah, that's a good question. It's good. You can't know what you don't know, or whatever.
Sorry. Give me an idea. You don't have to talk about what you think it may be. I have my own ideas too, but they're so contradictory in their own right.
I do believe that there is an agenda by the WF to try and it's not a belief system. This is what they actually write in their own prospectus. They want us to have a black swan event, is what they call it, which is just where there's going to be a power outage or there's going to be a cyber attack, and they're going to claim it's the Russians, which it won't be, by the way. It'll be the same corrupt people that run everything. They're going to blame it on the Russians and say that they're doing it, and they need to reset the internet, and you'll have to sign up to their way of doing it, which is all about consent. And most people don't realize that everything that they do, we all do today, is an offer to contract. It's an offer to consent, and you have to give your consent. And that's the only reason the top level, the Federation, allow the atrocities happen on Earth, because in a way we are consented to these atrocities. Whether that's your paperwork, when you were born, you were given a birth cert, and that birth cert, you have a live born record, then you have a birth cert, and the birth cert is the Vatican Church's ownership over your soul, according to them. And because you consent, your parents unknowing
fighting.
to them.
Sorry. I have a very stressed out cat. She was born that way.
Yeah. And well, ultimately, what I'm saying is everything is an offer to contract, and if we could keep consenting to these atrocities, we're going to have trouble. That the timeline becomes more negative. But I think I'm really seeing it myself that we're not doing that anymore, and that's what waking up really is not consenting, and that has power. Saying no in the astral world, for example, has enormous power. Like, it is huge, because we are the everything. So if we have a clear intention of anything, it does become manifest. So the answer is that I see a positive timeline. I can only, I like to narrow my own focus on what I know I can do. And every day I impact people positively, because that's who I am, and I want to be that. It's who I want. It's a choice. I know I can be the devil if I want it, but I don't want that. Everybody has that capacity.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
And I think the more people that wake up, the more people link with people that are woken, and it has a huge chain effect. Like Dolores Cannon talks about the new Earth, and that there'll be two Earths and that they'll separate, and they'll have two kind of Earths coming. But I don't really see it like that. The only way that would be valid is more in line with your conscious awareness. There's not going to be literally another Earth. There's going to be two people living neighbors beside each other. One will live in this reality, and that's very valid, because, like I said about like the fairies and stuff, there's individuals that have a high enough frequency can see that bandwidth, and that's all it is. Even though they've always existed, they're always here. So that's
I think the new Earth is already here. I mean, I'm already seeing things. You're seeing things. You're experiencing things. You're speaking about, like, it's already there. Where it's not coming, it's here. You just got to hop on board to your own soul's agenda, which is wake up to who you are. Tell me about Project Bluebeam and this whole UFO thing.
So Project Bluebeam is a Cabal run initiative, which is to understand this. There's a matrix on Earth, and a matrix is the collection of ideas that everybody holds, and that on Earth is particularly controlled and modified and regulated at an extreme level with extreme prejudice. So that's a concept about like ghosts and aliens and all that typically are not in the matrix bubble, because it's not meant for that. That's not, it's a self-sustaining bubble of thoughts and ideas, and it's very much regulated by the likes of three-letter agencies like CIA, NSA, and all these individuals are hyper monitoring that online. So every time you're online, there's groups set up with these guys to try and influence how we think about it, about the world. So with that in mind, in that context, Project Bluebeam is a technology that the Cabal, which are the secret societies, which are the origins originally of the Israelites and the Akhenatans of the world. That's their rooting of their belief systems. They have had secret societies for so long, and they are dictating where we really go with the world. And the likes of Project Bluebeam is just another attempt to manipulate us and corral us through fear and deceit and lies, to corral us into in a section to believe something and to have that permanent belief system in place. So, because we know and they know that that your DNA is impacted by your belief systems exclusively. So, if we believe, for example, they're proposing is that they're using this holographic technology, like a hologram you see in Star Wars, the little fella standing on the middle and the people are surrounded in a circle looking at this hologram. They exist, those holograms. So they're using that technology to literally manifest the dominant fears of people. So most people's fear is based on who are uncertain. Maybe you might revert back to your old religious belief because it's what safety feels like for you, or you believe that you're worm food when you die and you're going to go in, and that's what your fear is, that there's nothingness. So what this Project Bluebeam is attempting to do is to give people a false hope or a false flag, false hope of what the answers to the universe really are, and that this is what we ought to follow and behave like.
So it's the same as it always has been. It's the same
Correct.
project.
It's rehashed
project.
In another. Yeah.
Okay, so but Project Bluebeam, isn't that got to do with the fake UFO and the alien invasion?
Well, Project Bluebeam, they could put it in. They've 3 or 4 different scenarios at least that they might run depending on the environment of the day.
Tell me those 3 and 4 fake narratives.
One is the likes of Christ coming out, appearing in the sky as an angel and coming back and delivering a message to humanity.
Okay.
Another one is that UFOs, the disclosure that we're having at the moment becomes real, and they say that actually all along there's been these gorgeous love and life beings that are coming to Earth, and they're gonna change your life. All you've got to do is follow their rules, and you'll learn what it's like to be a whole again. So even though it will be more Cabal orchestrating the negative agenda, trying to manipulate how we believe about ourselves again and give up our power, like all religions do, it's going to be another version of a religion. So what they're trying to do as part of that is corral all the religions into one, make it easier to consolidate it. So there's one world order, one religion. And this one religion they'll say, well, now because there's ETs involved, UFOs, all these belief systems were always the same anyway. They're going to say, look, we always knew that ultimately it was the same deity we had to follow, which is these new UFOs. They're going to emerge that we had data. The church might do that. We had this information for millennia. We just didn't tell you because whatever reason. But now that they're here, we didn't want you to be spooked. You have to listen to every word and believe everything they say, even though that's still them anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's like one belief system is replaced by another.
But wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where you formulate your own words and your own thoughts and your own reality and your own version of reality based on how you interact with your experiences, and it's not forced fed through subliminals in the air and in the music and in the films and in the chemtrails and in the water and in the food. We are so influenced by, even the air that we breathe has got nanoparticle technology in it to influence your thought process and your frequency. Like, it's fucking far out how infiltrated we are. And sometimes if I don't get a good night's sleep, and that stuff can bother me, but if I just stay on my own track and keep my own vibration in alignment to my own truth, I can kind of just go, well, that may be so, but my truth is this. This is my version of reality, and I'm very comfortable in my own skin as a person. I like my own reality. I enjoy my own life, and it's so much noise There's so much noise, guys. You have to know what is your own thought process. And as Daniel's saying, like, if you are hearing something, are you hearing that and accepting that as to be so? Have you even investigated that theory for yourself? Have you even analyzed that material? Or are you just going, oh, this said that, so that means that, like a robot? You know, that's what you're really talking about. It's about stepping out of the control of how you live, how you breathe, how you eat, how you sleep, and stop being a slave to something that's not you, that's actually using you as a radar. As a radar, they're kind of using humans to feed off our emotions, whether they're good or bad. They're just feeding off our love, our fear, all of it. And I now just have access to my own thoughts, and I know when something's in my mind. I know when it's there, and I just say, you're not invited.
Mm.
You're not, that feeling I'm having, you're not invited. And I want you to continue talking. Sorry, I interrupted you there. You're talking about how they're implanting ideas about religions as one world government, one world religion, Project Bluebeam, because you're going to cover the whole UFO, even what's happening in Congress at the moment. So continue in talking about what you're talking about.
Yeah, just a bit on your topic first, though, is that your frequency and who you are and what your belief systems are, you're doing everything you can do, and that's all you can do. But do the word of caution to anybody who is a higher frequency person who's expanding their ideas and always trying to do that, is that the more you expand your ideas and raise your frequency, the more you have a greater impact on the environment around you, for good or bad. So if you have a high frequency and you start buying into the crap that you read and these pretend prophecies that they put out, if you start buying into that, you are going to manifest that, not them. They can't do that. You only can manifest it. And because you don't know that you're the one creating it, ultimately, you're being manipulated in that way. So that's a key thing to remember, that one wakened person is the same as about 200,000 sleeping people. So in terms of their influence on physical reality that we have. So a handful of starseeds can change the world. One starseed really can, or a powerful enough one can. So this is the actual reality. So while you say you're in your reality and you have your thoughts and beliefs and you don't want to focus too much on other stuff, that's really important too, but not to ignore it, to say it doesn't exist. Head in the sand stuff is not going to do the trick either. You kind of need to get a framework of what the whole picture is. And when you know that, your decisions can be more fruitful and impactful, because you're like a razor sharp focused. You're like a weapon. You have your scope on. You've targeted what your reality is going to be. When you've taken too much and you don't know much about anything, but you're just bouncing off the walls, like a lot of people are, an automatic pilot, then you're less likely to impact your reality positively, and you're going to put up flags on your Facebook page of the next thing that you're being told to believe in or to be scared of, or to support. But when you know yourself intrinsically, your DNA repairs itself, your frequency, you're on a one mission track. It's easy to do. These things literally outside your bubble, you won't attract any of them anyway, because you're such a high frequency. And that's what I would tell people to focus on, not to be saying that there's Project Bluebeam, there's all these terrible things that are planned for us, and we have to be careful. The World Health Organization, the WF, all these agendas, they are actually irrelevant, really, when it comes down to the end of it all. All you can do is prepare for the possibility of something going wrong, but know in your heart that you are the source and you're creating it anyways, and that really is irrelevant to you.
Yeah.
Because that is the power in this whole thing. Because where your energy goes, you attract that. So if your energy is predominantly on the worry and the fear and the lack of and the potential catastrophe impending, you're never going to get to your own evolution, your next step to jump on the train of frequency increasing. And all it comes down to, I never worried about, when I was playing sport, I never worried about the opposite team to a point of worried, oh, they're bigger, they're stronger, they've this, that. I just worried about, did I do everything I could to be strong enough, to be tactical, to know my skills are there? And I focus on my game. And that's the same thing people need to do. They need to focus on their own game. They don't need to worry about the other stuff, because it is actually irrelevant ultimately. And we only breathe life into it, like the Bible said, when we trusted that the message is accurate. That's it.
And if we keep regurgitating what's coming in, you're creating more of that.
Exactly,
and so I just want to finish on what I said, because you just reminded me that we are creator beings. We are the creators, and that's why they are using our frequencies to manipulate us to create their realities, what they want to see. Why on earth are they even interested in us? Why is our water, why is everything Why is everything so fixed? And as you said, like trying to put these forgetter veils on and implant our minds with more concepts and ideas that are further from the truth. The truth is that I am, like you, a creator being, and I can create my own reality. I have to believe that. I have to know that. I have to road test that. And when you see that actually is real, you'll realize that what you think is what you create. So start having your
Mm.
own ideas about what you want to see in your reality, not like what you don't want to see. Because I have friends going, oh, this is going to come. And I'll say, it is going to come into your reality because you just said it is.
Mm.
Yes,
Exactly.
I know I educate myself and as much as I can of what's around me, but I don't reiterate it like by sharing it a lot or by, I don't
Yes. Yeah.
regurgitate their story because they want to feed you saying, share this, share this, share this, put it out
Mm.
there, warn people. Don't do that because what you're doing is you're creating their reality.
Definitely. That's exactly what I'm saying. Exactly that
You
is.
create your own reality because you're the creator being. They want your creative power. That's why they're utilizing your frequency to create their own fake narrative, which they've been doing for millennials.
Definitely.
Um, and tell us about all this, what's happening at the moment in America with the Congress regarding UAPs and what are they? And tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
So I have to go very soon, but let's just wrap this up. But I will say this is
Yeah.
that they are, so the technology in 1940s, in the 1940 late 1940s is when a lot of this really became exacerbated and pertinent, in that there was shot down craft where there's a sphere of influence around these craft, which is electromagnetic bubble that is makes it not subject to the laws of gravity that they can generate, which cancels gravity. All these UFOs have, and that maybe we can go into the science of that other day, the exacts of
Yeah.
how it works. But today we're just going to say briefly touch on it that one of those was not working too well. It was off their field of influence, let's call it, was off, and they got shot down. So, or they felt the electromagnetic poles, actually the energy affected their force field, if you want to call it that, and that's why it went down, because they shouldn't be able to be influenced by anything if it wasn't wrong, something wasn't broken. Anyway, that's what the Roswell crash was all about. That's what started a lot of this. But to give us context, we've had these alien races on Earth. If you want the factions from the Lemurian colony, which were the advanced races of the good ENL branch, they went underground. That's where the likes of Agartha comes from. Telos in California under Mount Shasta. That's where in Romania there's a civilization only 50 meters under the ground under Constanza, and they go all through the Carpathian Mountains. There's all these positive races that deep under the ground, because they're not subjected to the lower frequencies that we have here when they go underground, and it protects them and keeps them in their own sphere of influence and their own bubble, that away from the toxic, destructive interference that we have here on the surface. So there's a lot of factions that have gone underground that are high frequency people, but they're UFOs. They have UFOs there, so they have the original technology from a long time ago, so they can come in and out of the earth when they want, and into under the seas. You'll see clips of them all over. But the ones that are under the sea typically are more cabal based, more they're getting their back engineered craft that they had from the 40s. They've adapted that technology and used that 0 point energy technology and they built submarines with it. So the submarines are actual submarines that have that technology. They have to have a north charge and a south charge, like opposite positive and negative charge, to create a field, which is a torus, which causes that bubble. Those, you can put them in anything. So those reactors are put onto those ships or the submarines, so they can go into the water as well as go to space. You can go out of the atmosphere as well with it. And this technology is ancient; it's not new. That's what I said to you. What Quetzalcoatl was, and the Eye of Horus. Horus was the ship as well. So was Quetzalcoatl, and Horus means aura, which is time. Which means they'd say, at what time is Horus at the moment? Means at what position is he in the sky? Is the ship? Because to have a ship, have by the virtue of the technology, you have a time traveling machine when you have a UFO. So that's where you're getting into the idea of interdimensional. The interdimensional is not really a good term. I wouldn't think of it that way. They're just in a different frequency band, and that like we said about the fairies and everything, you can either see them or you can't, depending on your frequency band. So they are going out of our realm technically by jumping. That's how they go to traverse great distances, is through frequency manipulation and using frequencies to go back in time, forward in time, sideways in time, and to jump to great distances in the universe, because it is a soup of energies. It's like one blob of energy in one. There's no forward time, back time, really, or upper. That's only based on the perception and awareness of that individual at that time. There's no real, because when you travel the distance of the universe, you can't. It's called AUs. Is what they measure, which is based on the celestial movements, like the sun moving around the Earth, on the Mars and everything, all the planetary axis that they rotate on. We can't really measure in cycles when you go deep space, because that becomes irrelevant. So that's only relevant to really short-term distances in a ship. But if you want to go massive distances, you don't have that as a barometer anymore. But what you do have is our frequency maps, which are just, because everything is a soup of frequencies anyway. So you're just to jump instantly to another place, you just need to know the numerical value to get to that spot. And going back to the UAPs, we have the human faction of the Cabal, the Deep Cabal, which are the military industrial complex, are being fed money to do the research on these back engineered things, but they're getting it from government taxpayers' dollars. And that's why and NASA is a front. NASA is just a front to make people believe in the advances of humans, and to believe in their exploration at the level of science that they want you to believe, which is all manipulated. But at the same time, they'll funnel all that interest and money into their black ops. They're called black projects.
So
and those black projects are what these UFPs, they've created their own triangular crafts. The human factions have, and I have a friend of mine who saw them over her house actually. And my brother-in-law saw one too. He doesn't believe in any of that, but he saw one. He swore he saw the triangular one as well. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say is that the disclosure is a farce, because what they're doing is, I believe anything that you see on TV is a controlled version of truth, and at very best it's a grain of truth in a sea of lies. But just the context that we've given it is that there's humans that are advanced humans from the ENL branch that are living deep into the earth in a place called Agartha, or in those other places I mentioned under the earth, who are not hiding, but they're trying to go away from the normal human population and the negative ones on the surface, and have their own civilization. But they are now being infiltrated by the negatives too, because they have been, and as time, and the Arctic Circle and even Antarctica itself, for example, is the meeting place of all the negative cabal, and that's where they all meet up.
It's like hell on earth, that place.
It is, because all the progressive races meet there with human factions openly walking around, like literally aliens walking around like normal, because it's such a massive landmass that is very inhabitable, but it's not inhabitable from the outside, so no human could really get in unless they were...
But it's illegal to go there.
Correct, and that's for that exact reason. It's the only country in the world that you can't fly over because of that. Apart from the fact that the plane might fall out of the sky because of the pole's energy, the electromagnetic pole's energy, which there's holes and there's openings at either end of the pole, because there has to be to create that torus effect, that you would go under, your plane would crash. But they are meeting. I just need to say this: the likes of China, Russia, and all these countries, America, these are all meeting, and they have their flags up in those on bases on the surface, and they're meeting those up, and they're just discussing when the next agenda will be, because it's all two sides of the same coin. So the more we believe that it's this bad guy versus good guy, and we buy in at that level, we're being played massively.
Massively.
They meet up at the summits, and they're all shaking hands and having the laugh, the G7 summit and all these. And then a week later, they're apparently warring as if it's the worst thing in the world. And we're like, we need to get the popcorn and watch and say, isn't it terrible what's happening? Oh, did you not hear? Jesus, it's happening again. And then everything is influenced, markets, everything, finances. And another day we should go into the markets and how they actually really work, and how they're manipulated by the top players, and how our documentation work. That's another one. But
I'm going to bring you back maybe next week. We go to the whole UFO disclosure thing. But just before you head off, tell us about, because NASA, who set up NASA? It's to do with the Nazis, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
The top the geniuses behind all the executions and the experiments, the top scientists, like these are really sinister characters, were all taken from the Nazis, the camps, and they were basically awarded to go and set up NASA by the Americans.
Yeah.
That's
And
really what's happening there.
it is. And the Nazis, to give you context, Hitler himself was a reptilian. And that's why we didn't really get into the soul in its own right, but we are human meat suits, and we can have different species come into this human body because of that original manipulation of the 21 different different DNA of 21 races is our body, composes our body. So because we are so compatible with so many races, that the likes of, to be called, you can have a reptilian soul, or to say even reptilian soul just means that the dominant frequency that they hold was originally in the reptilian bodies for many generations potentially, which are just ideas.
Yeah. And
they adapted to match the human at that level, but who they are inside is different. Completely. If you are frequent like us, we are high frequency people. If we were to walk up to, for example, when the Queen was alive, she was a reptilian, or Hillary Clinton, for example, another one, just to name names. Yeah. If you went beside them and you were really shined as we do when we're happy, they would be unwell. They'd have to leave. They'd be coughing. They'd literally have to leave because it's incompatible. It's like the positive charge is too polar to the negative, and that's how they're charged. And people are being infiltrated through governments because we think that all humans are made equally, and that's what a human is, just somebody who's a person that can be good or bad. That's sort of true, but the bad parts are more deliberately negatively affected consciously. They're the bad entity. There's entities, and they can take people over, or to kind of fill that human vessel if we allow them to. We can have like what we call demons, and if the more you practice bad behavior, quote unquote, the more you're a frequency match to these lower entities. And that's how the system is designed to do that. Through the court system, particularly, is a huge magnet for that. But politics as well, because these entities know that anybody who has more influence to cause other people pain, they'll target those individual humans first, because they'll know they'll get greater reward and food for that suffering.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
So.
No, I know about entities because in part of the work, sometimes you're dealing with entities, and sometimes entities can enter to trauma. So when your frequency is lowered through a trauma, through a shock, they're waiting actually to go in, and it's all consent, and they can blind you into consent, which is what COVID was blind consent.
Yeah.
And, so I'm going to let you go, but I'm going to invite you back on next week so we can continue this conversation. Are you happy with that?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Thank you for your time. And we did. We covered a lot, and we'll just continue and keep going, because the markets is going to be a very interesting one as well, especially with what's happening now.
And I hope it'll really help people, because you want to position yourself for what's coming, and you give yourself. You don't want the rug to be pulled from you, and I believe that is what's being planned for next year, or latest the year after, but definitely next year, the rug will be pulled, because that'll be 300 years since their last reset. So.
Wow.
So just to be aware that it's a cyclical thing. So so I think we can help people with that massively if they want to tune in.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for popping on.
And we'll just hang up here, or how are we doing it to finish?
Yeah, we're just going to say adios amigos until next week.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much.